First of all, thank you for letting me do this. As you know, I've turned my life upside down in the last couple of months over all this kind of stuff. And I have no credibility whatsoever on this. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an activist of any kind. The only credibility I have is with you guys, my friends and family. So this is where I'm going to start with all of this, which is to say giving these kind of talks to people that actually know me and don't think I'm a complete idiot. And then I'm going to write about it a little bit and see what happens. So, again, thank you for lending me your time. I know there's some resistance to all of this. Hi, Mom. No, this is the talk. You can come out when you're ready.
But it's on video.
The climate stuff.
Oh, this is the talk?
This is it.
Oh, you started it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh,
Okay.
you beat me.
I'm sorry. Anyway, I do appreciate you letting me talk to you about this. I know everybody's resistant. It's bad news, and nobody wants to hear bad news and stuff. So this is a talk about climate change, and broadly, you know what that means. It means that you burn fossil fuels, it puts carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the planet heats up. So the result is droughts, floods, landslides, sea level increases, decreased food production, and global instability. So the problem is big. Oh, I don't have my thing with me. Oh, I can't run down. The problem is big. The problem is everywhere. The problem is monstrous. But I tell you now, it's time to hug the monster. And this is the part where I have a little picture of a cute little monster that I'm supposed to hold up, and you're all like, "Aw." And if Sarah were here, I would have her dressed in a monster suit, and she would come around and give you hugs. She's going to be a big part of it later on, but I forgot it downstairs because I'm an idiot. So, the problem is big, but... Hey, Jay. I'm giving you a talk about climate change. You want to be in on that or not? You can...
You've frozen him in his tracks.
Yeah.
Change. Come on.
No.
It's a perfect night.
You're right, it is.
It's hard to tell.
I would love to have Jay here. The science for this is not new. It's been around for more than 50 years. So we've had many opportunities to address the problem. Inevitably, we've made it worse. So now we've basically passed the limits of what the system can endure for this. And by the system, I mean Earth. And I don't mean that we're going to change it. I mean it's going to change because we're just beyond the physical limitations of the system. If you're driving a car and you drive it without oil in the engine, it's going to stop. It doesn't matter how much gas is in the tank. It doesn't matter who's in the car with you. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. You've just reached the limits of that system, and it's going to stop. So it is with the environment. If you cut down more trees than you grow, you run out of trees. If you fish more fish than are in the sea, you run out of fish. And if you put a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the planet gets warmer and weather patterns change. This is not controversial stuff. This is just common sense and high school science. So, there is a little bit of science in this. I'm going to go into that just for a second. Let's talk about the science. I'm going to put a number in everybody's head. Ready? The number is 350. 350 parts per million is the acceptable amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Anything beyond that, ask a scientist, anything beyond that, and you risk ecological collapse. So, the number, 350, that's what we've been at for a long time, for thousands of years. That's what gives us the Earth we have today. It's cold on the top, it's warm in the middle, we got predictable seasons where we grow the crops and all that kind of stuff. It's the Earth we know and love. Today, right now, the Earth is over 400 parts per million, and it's rising fast. So that change from 350 to 400 parts per million started right at the beginning of the industrial era. And that change from 350 to 400 has moved us about 1 degree warmer. That doesn't sound like much, right? 1 degree doesn't sound like very much. But what does it mean in practical terms? So let me run down a few of the practical terms. 9 of the 10 hottest years on record have been in the last 10 years. In fact, the one we're in right now, is the hottest year on record. We've been setting temperature records all over the United States. Every state has set one in the last 24 months, something like that. All this warm air also means warmer water, and warmer water means more clouds. And so there's been this big increase in clouds over the ocean. Bigger thunderheads means bigger storms, bigger hurricanes, that kind of thing. You probably heard about that during Katrina. Not that global warming caused it, because it's hard to prove one thing or another, but global warming makes storms that much more destructive because of all this extra cloud stuff going on. And more storms also means more lightning, and more lightning means more wildfires. So you probably heard about Colorado this year. They had the biggest wildfire in the history of Colorado, and it burned 200 homes and made a lot of people homeless and lots of forest was lost. Since 1970, wildfires are up 4 times what they were in 1970. There are also severe droughts. You probably heard about the droughts across the United States and in other places. So droughts, not least of which are in the United States, but also Australia is going through like a 60-year drought right now. 60% of the U.S. is in drought, and scientists are basically saying that this is the new normal. Like it could last 50 or 100 years in the American Southwest. And all this new heat, of course, as you probably also heard of, is reducing like corn yields, wheat and barley, all that kind of stuff. Food is getting harder to grow, and food prices are spiking as a result. You may have seen that. I don't know what you guys buy, but corn is in everything, and as pretty much prices are up across the board. When rain does come around the world, it comes much more quickly and much more violently. So flooding has happened all over the planet. It's up about 10, 15, 20%. So it doesn't make a lot of news here in the United States, but there have been massive floods in the last 2 years in Pakistan, in Indonesia, making like hundreds of thousands of people homeless. And of course, there's the poster child for global warming, climate change, which is the Arctic ice, which has been receding more and faster every year. Basically, in the next 2 to 3 decades, we won't have any at all. Santa Claus is going to have to go live somewhere else. And that has drastic implications for lots of reasons, but that's the one that everybody can sort of glom onto the easiest. So this is just a sampling, of course. I mean, we're just talking about different parts of, the global environment. And that's all with just this 1 degree increase. And worse yet, the climate is getting worse and worse at a faster and faster rate. So as all that Arctic ice melts, there's less of it to reflect sunlight, so the world warms up from that. There's all this in Siberia, in Russia, there's all this tundra, which is just peat and methane underneath, and as that melts, it's releasing methane up into the atmosphere. And methane is another, like, even more powerful greenhouse gas, so we're getting warmer from that. And of course, as more people means more paper, which means less forests, which means less of a sink to put all the carbon dioxide into. So right now, the problem is not getting better, it's getting worse. No matter how many Priuses and other things we've been buying, it's getting much worse and much faster. So at our current rate of increase, at the end of the century, we're going to have carbon rates of 600 to 700 parts per million. And this translates to a 4 to 5 degree Celsius difference, which is more like 10 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you can't picture the Earth at that temperature, I can paint around the edges for you. This is not something anybody can predict with any certainty, because at some point we cross thresholds where the Earth just goes out of control and it keeps warming on its own no matter what we do. But at that temperature increase, at 4 to 5 degrees Celsius, we're talking about oceans that are so acidic that they can't really support life. Nobody eats fish anymore. Sea levels rise over 20 feet, so the great cities of the world are underwater. Boston, New York, San Francisco, that's a problem. Huge swaths of land along the equator become desert. In some places, deserts are advancing by 3 miles a year. And if you cut that out, if that all becomes desert and you can't grow things there anymore, those people, A, have to migrate away, and B, a lot of people are going to starve. Because there isn't the capacity to grow food for the 7 billion people we have right now. And inevitably, there are going to be wars and geopolitical instability as everybody fights over an increasingly smaller and smaller piece of the pie from what resources remain. So, all in all, life gets pretty dreadful unless we do something about it, which is kind of why I turned my life on its head in the first place. All this science has been around for decades. It's been borne out over countless studies. I think the number is 97 out of 100 climate scientists would give you this account that I'm giving you right now. So don't trust me, trust one of them. But from a philosophical point of view, I would say that the deal has always been that we leave the Earth in a better place than we left it. That was the deal. That we call that progress, right? The wheel, penicillin, codes of laws. This is what we try to do. This was the covenant we have with our children and our grandchildren. And we're breaking that covenant now. I don't think, and this is what keeps me up at night, really, is like thinking about Haley and thinking about Casey and thinking about the children that Sarah and I want to have. And when they're our age, when they're in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, this problem is going to be, they're going to be entrenched in this problem. It's going to be everywhere and all over. And I don't think they're going to be mad at us for breaking the covenant. I think they're going to be too busy worrying about their own lives to bother with blame. But we're talking food riots and refugee camps and, the collapse of society. And I know that sounds dramatic and stupid, but that's kind of the scale of the problem. And Jay made a good point when he came out. Like, this is a beautiful night. There's a reason we can't internalize this. And it's because we're living really, really good lives right now. I mean, look around. I have these beautiful faces that I'm related to. We've been eating terrific food. We went to the beach this week. We played mini golf. Like, we're living the richest, best, most satisfying lives that anybody has ever lived in the history of man. And so it's hard. Like, it's hard to internalize this kind of stuff when your life is really good and everything seems okay. And, it doesn't affect us right now. And, like, 1 degree here or there doesn't matter. It comes in at the edges with food, and it comes in at the edges when somebody else gets flooded or whatever, but it hasn't hit us in our everyday lives. So it's hard to really bring that inside. So what I would say is, if the science doesn't sway you, and for a lot of people it doesn't, it's no big deal. A lot of people it doesn't. People need to feel this kind of stuff. So if the science doesn't sway you, I would say go to a place that the science can't take you. Just trust your intuition. I mean, we're all wonderfully advanced beings with our iPhones and our automobiles, but we're still, at least for now, still flesh and blood creatures of the earth. And I believe, at least, we still understand our environment intuitively at some degree. So when the droughts come across the Midwest that last hundreds of days at a time, I mean, that feels a little weird, a little wrong to us. And in New England this year, we had almost no winter to speak of. And to us, that feels a little strange because we're kind of known for winters in the Northeast. And when the Midwest experiences record heat waves at the same time, storms are knocking out power and everybody's sitting in their house for 2 weeks sweltering and they don't know why or what's going on, that's a little wrong, a little scary, a little weird. Just feel that, that's something you can feel. You don't have to look at that on the paper. So that's all I have to say. If the science doesn't sway you, like, see what your body tells you. All right, I've brought you to kind of an emotional low point, but I want to say overall I'm actually very optimistic about the whole situation. I'm an optimist by nature, so you can discount that a little bit, but the reason I'm optimistic is that human beings have the opportunity, we have the ability to react very quickly and very decisively once we're actually face-to-face with a crisis. The quote I like is, and maybe I busted this on somebody already, the quote I like is, nobody starts exercising before the heart attack, right? But when we do, when you have that heart attack, people change their whole lives around. They change their diets, they start exercising, and they turn it around because it's there and it's prescient. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, and I can give you some good examples of how human beings can do this on a much bigger scale than just one man's heart attack. So the easy one is the economic crisis of 2008. That one had been on a slow boil for over a decade, and there were plenty of people that said, hey, this is all going to blow up in our face. And they were, of course, ridiculed and sort of pushed off to the side. But when it all did blow up, in 2008, we got big reaction from governments globally, worldwide. We had stimulus packages, we had TARP in the United States, we had bailouts of companies. All within months, we had this rolled out. And we can argue the merits, of course, of whether that was a good idea or bad idea or the policies, but that's not the point. The point is we went for it, and we reacted decisively. And the other example I can give, which in many ways is more apt because it's a larger problem and it's more existential, was the rise of Nazi Germany, where for decades in the 1930s they start to rearm, and then they invade the Rhineland and Czechoslovakia, and all along the way people are apologizing, they're denying. Churchill famously warned about the Nazis for a long time, and everybody laughed at him. And the reason people do this is it's obvious. Nobody likes to think about big change, and nobody likes to think about bad news and planning for the future. But when we do, we're good at it. We're really good at it when it's in front of us. So this gives me a lot of hope. And this is how I think it's going to be with climate change. I mean, to me, it's inevitable that we're going to get to this threshold where enough people believe in it, although I don't like that term, that we're going to force action. And the reason I say that is, well, one, there's a whole generation of kids coming up that have this knowledge already. And so in another 20 years when they're in power, that takes care of itself. The more pressing reason is that we're going to see more and more seasons like we've been seeing in the last 6 months. Disasters are going to get more widespread and more dangerous, deadly. So at some point, either the youth will catch up or we'll get kicked in the face hard enough that people will start to wake up. So this, in a nutshell, is why I've decided to do what it is I've decided to do with my life. And the way to affect this problem, at least in my opinion, is to just raise awareness like I'm doing with you now. I mean, these problems have to be solved at a collective level. No amount of Priuses, no amount of environmentally friendly soap is going to solve this problem at this point. Like, there's a math problem. You can encapsulate it, and this is just a math problem. It's a system dynamics problem, actually. And the trajectory that we're on right now is too severe for any half-assed kind of solutions. I think the way that it'll probably go is the way that the European Union stuff has been going, which is sort of like half-assed solution followed by half-assed solution. But the way that we need to be addressing this is with pretty much a warlike level of mobilization, because every year that we delay makes this problem that much worse for those coming after us. And it just gets harder and harder to solve because there's more and more carbon in the atmosphere, and it just takes more and more effort to pull it out. So the sooner we start, the better. So my goal in all of this is just to bring that tipping point where enough people force governments into action, to bring that tipping point closer towards the present than it is somewhere out in the future. So what does that mean? What do we do? All that kind of stuff. It obviously starts with energy. We're still making the problem worse every day, burning fossil fuels and putting it into the atmosphere. So we need to do something about stopping that and doing something else. Obviously, we don't want to go back to being cavemen living in caves, but even with today's technology, there's ways to do this as long as you have the political will and the investment, political and personal investment. So in the short term, the one that is getting worked on right now and that I'll probably get involved in, the shot across the bow, is ending the subsidies to big oil and gas in the United States. It's about $100 billion a year, which, by the way, is about 10 times as much as they give to renewables. And it won't make any difference, like whether it gets cut out or not. It's $100 billion is nothing. But it's kind of the warning shot. It's kind of like the shot heard around the world is the way I would put it. And and they don't need the money. That's the other answer, is they make more money since, it's the most profitable business, that's the quote I like, most profitable business since money was invented. So they don't need our money. And their business plan is basically killing us, so we need to find a way to do something else. But it is going to take an enormous amount of effort, and the only way we're going to get to that level of effort is if we change people's minds. So if you believe me in any of this, or you want to talk about it more, the two things you can do are just to talk to people like I'm talking to you now. And I don't mean to give talks like this, because I don't expect that out of anybody, but you could bring it up at dinner parties, or you could just contradict somebody when they say something a little bit wacky. And the other thing that nobody wants to hear is you can vote for whoever has the best climate change policies. This is not a problem we're going to solve overnight, and I certainly don't have all the answers. It's going to be kind of a slow burn to get where we're going, but it's going to pick up speed, and hopefully it's going to pick up speed at a faster rate than climate change is picking up speed. So anyway, it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of effort. The estimates from the books I read, 10, 20, 30% of GDP globally. And John can tell you how much money that is. I don't know. It's a big number. And if that all sounds pie in the sky, if that sounds fantastical to you, I would agree, because we are in a time where we are short of political will and certainly short of money. But at some point, we're going to come face to face with the fact that there's little other choice. So I'm not too worried about that. On a personal note, with all of this, I'd like to say that this is really weird, what we're doing right here. I feel really weird to be talking about such dire circumstances, such events in such stark contrast to the lives that we're clearly living right here, sipping wine in Chatham, Massachusetts, like a quarter mile from the beach, smelling the salt air. It's weird for me. It seems more like hysteria or religious zealotry than it does, I don't know, science, right? But at the end of the day, I was convinced by numbers. I'm an engineer, I'm an analytical person, and it was charts, graphs, and numbers that ultimately convinced me. So that's all I really can come back to, is that the science is the science. You can ask a scientist about this stuff. The numbers are the numbers, and denial is basically a luxury that we've afforded ourselves for too long already. So for me, at least, it's time to get to work, which is why I've done what I've done. So in closing, once again, I'd like to reiterate my optimism. This is not, I mean, I'm giving you bad news, but there's good news to be had once we get our stuff together. The effects of climate change are here, they're getting worse, but we've hid from our problems long enough, and now there's nothing left to do but hug the monster. Sarah in the suit. Thank you, guys.